Ultimately, the Minnesota Wild come up short once again, falling 2-1 in overtime to the Winnipeg Jets. But a good battle. The Wild had heavy legs, but they battled all the way through. Filip Gustavsson was fantastic, and ultimately not enough for the Wild to come away with the win here tonight. We'll talk about the game for Filip Gustavsson. We'll take a look at some impressive numbers from Marat Huznadinov and a quiet night for the second line. We'll talk about all that on tonight's Locked On Wild postcast. Let's get it going.
You are Locked On Wild Postcast, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Minnesota Wild fall by a score of 2-1 in overtime to the Winnipeg Jets. They're now 1-0-2 on the season. A good battle. The Wilds were battling all the way through. It's pretty clear that there was just no energy in those legs. Winnipeg controlled a lot of the action, but ultimately they were able to make plays. Wild offense was just not able to get it done. Let's take a look at a few of the things to keep in mind from this game. I'm just going to go to the team stats here to start. The Jets, 35 shots to 27 for the Minnesota Wild. Faceoffs are pretty much dead even. Jets won 30, Wild won 29. Both teams 0 for on the power, or actually Winnipeg should be 1 for 3. They have ESPN has the Jets as 0 for 2 on the power play. So 1 for 3 for the Jets, 0 for 3 for the Wild. 15 block shots for the Wild, 11 for the Jets. And that was pretty much the tale of the tape here in this one. But I want to get to the key thing here in this game before we dive too far in. That penalty on Zach Bogosian at the end of the game. I'm gonna throw it out there. I don't have a problem with Bogosian taking that penalty because it prevented the Jets from beating the Wild potentially in regulation, and so it was a penalty because Bogosian had the stick of whatever Jets player that was. I don't even remember. He had the stick, but he prevented a goal potentially being scored at that point. That's just something you kind of have to live with if you're looking to survive a tough road environment and be able to get out of town with a point. So I actually think that was a good job by Zach Bogosian to worry about preventing them from getting a good look. Because what happens if the Jets score there? Then you go into St. Louis with nothing. So I don't have a problem with Bogosian taking that penalty. You just have to be able to not give up a power play goal at the end of the game. But it was a good battle. Joel Eriksson will be back on Tuesday. No idea what to expect with Jared Spurgeon, but at the end of the day, just offense just needed to make a few plays to come away with the win here in that one. Let's check the heat map for where the shots came from for both teams here tonight, because it's actually a little more tilted than I expected it was going to be here tonight. So let's start by taking a look at what the Wild were able to do on the left side. So obviously you have the Jake Middleton goal from way out on the perimeter, and Connor Hellebuyck just did not have he didn't have a good sight line on it, I don't think, and as a result, the Wild get their goal from there. For Winnipeg, they were able to get the tying goal which we'll talk about more in depth here in a little bit. They were able to get the tying goal on a drawn play with a few seconds left in the first period. Mark Scheifele with the shot to make it 1-1. They pulled their goalie because there were like 4 seconds left in the period. They pulled the goalie, and so there was really no worry for them being able to, have the puck intercepted and maybe sent down the other way for an empty net goal. Really no worry, because there was really only time if they win the face-off to get a shot on net, and they end up capitalizing on it to come away with the goal. And then the other goal that they score comes from the face-off circle, the right face-off circle. Kyle Connor, absolutely dead legs at that point, and Winnipeg with a 4-on-3, able to just to get their look and to come away with the win. But there's a few things to take away from this game. Filip Gustavsson was fantastic, and really just like he was dialed in for the entirety of the game here tonight, which is great because that's 2 games in a row in which he has put some really strong film out there. So that's really encouraging to see from him. Kaprizov, Rossi, Zuccarello, despite being asked to play just oodles of minutes. Kaprizov, I think, has played 45 minutes in the past 2 games. That line had some really good looks they just couldn't finish on. Murat Huznadinov doing some nifty work on the boards and was 8 of 12 in the face-off circle. Did some good things, and he looked good with Foligno and Trennan, who were just really taking it to the Jets pretty much the entirety of the night. So that was good to see. I really don't have a ton of issue with really anything that we saw in this game. I mean, the second line was pretty quiet, but on the road and with the Jets having a line that is really capable of kind of shutting things down, they were able to deploy that line against Matt Boldy and the rest of his crew. Would have liked to have seen them maybe be able to impact a little bit more offensively, but they didn't. And so that's what it comes down to is if you aren't able to take advantage of a few of those opportunities against a goalie like Connor Hellebuyck, you're probably going to come up on the wrong end. But this isn't a situation. This is the exact opposite situation that we saw against the Seattle Kraken, where it feels like you kind of let one go. The Wild earned this point tonight. They earned the point by getting this game into overtime, and so in a tough road environment, that's a lot of the time it's really all you can ask for. So up and down the lineup, really the only 2 guys on defense that were on the ice for the goals. Jonas Brodin was a -2. Brock Faber was a -1. But Brock Faber, 25 minutes, 57 seconds on the ice. Jonas Brodin, 20:59. Zach Bogosian, 20:37. Beyond that, Jake Middleton played 18 minutes, 34 seconds. So you're relying on those top 4 guys pretty heavy. But you look at the numbers for, even the fourth line guys. Lauko got 10 minutes. Ogren got 11 minutes. We'll talk more about Liam Ogren's game here in a little bit. And Freddie Gaudreau, he got 13 in this one tonight. So, it just capitalized on some of those odd man rush or breakaway opportunities, and this is probably a different result. But Connor Hellebuyck is a tough goalie, and so there are a few details to dive into, which I'm sure we will as I go through the comment section. But just came down to mostly the offense just having a tough time against the Jets, against Connor Hellebuyck, but also having a tough time really finding that second gear with what happened last night. And by the way, I have an interesting wrinkle to that, because there were plenty of people wondering why the NHL would schedule a 5 p.m. game after a 7 p.m. home game the night before, and why there wasn't anything that the Minnesota Wild could do about that. Well, it turns out actually that they might have been able to have a little something to say about that. Michael Russo going to I'm trying to find the tweet, but he said basically that teams can mostly dictate the times at which they play their home games, but the Wild didn't see a need to, up Saturday's home game so that maybe there was a little more time in between. So I thought that was interesting because my mind would immediately go to it being a schedule thing, but turns out not so much. So we'll oh, that's a good. I'm on Twitter and I said the Wild fought hard with tired legs, and somebody responded and said, tired legs, they've played 3 games since April. That's good. So a hard-fought battle. Wild came up on the wrong end. Should get Joel Eriksson back on Tuesday, which will be a big boost. Let's get to your comments. And we'll start with 6th or worst. Well, I have the Minnesota Wild finishing dead last in the division by a mile this year. No, I'm kidding. Look, it's going to be a tough division this year. Winnipeg has obviously got a ton going for them. Dallas, Colorado, off to a pretty bad start, but there's still the Colorado Avalanche. You've got Nashville. Utah's 3-0. They look fantastic. It's not just going to be the same usual suspects at the top, and then the Wild can kind of sneak in behind the pack. There are going to be probably 6 teams in this division that are fighting for playoff spots actively, maybe 7. Depending on what happens with Chicago, you might have all but one in the Central Division fighting for playoff spots. 3 get in automatically, and then it's wild card after that. But then in the Pacific, you've got the Kings, you've got the Kraken, there are going to be a bunch of teams fighting for positioning in the postseason. I feel like the Central is going to be way more competitive, which is why I've been pretty steadfast in the fact that I think 5 teams are going to get there from the Central. That's my official call, is that the Central Division will get 5 playoff teams. Pacific will get 3. But we'll see. I mean, if the battle level, like, I feel like there would have been an easy, like, schedule loss here, to where if the Wild just completely get their doors blown off by Winnipeg, you don't really take much into consideration. But I actually thought the Wild did a good job of battling. It's a tough Winnipeg team, and if you're going to beat teams like Winnipeg, you have to continue to bring that fight on a nightly basis. If you don't, well, then we're going to see what happened last year, where you go like 0-10, 1-10 against the teams above you in the Central Division. And if you're going to do that again this year, you're going to be on the outside looking in. So we'll see. But Alaskan Wampa was dead on, like all the way down to the point, I think, in predictions last year. And so I kind of am inclined to think that he's going to be right again this season. So, it was a battle that went either way. I do want to go back to, there was maybe one instance in which the Winnipeg Jets had the 6 players on the ice. But at the end of the day, the officials made the call that the Jets player was headed back to the bench and out of the play. And so they deemed that there was no penalty there. Again, I'll reinforce on the Bogosian penalty. You're taking that penalty to prevent the Jets from winning the game in regulation. So I don't have a problem with it. Probably if not for the second night of a back-to-back, maybe the Wild kill that off, because Murat Huznadinov nearly had a shorthanded opportunity the other way by himself on that kill. But at the end of the day, just jelly legs up and down the lineup was the reason that the Jets were able to score there. Safe to say the PK issue is not system, but talent. I still am of the belief that I think it's a combination of factors, but I think what also plays into it is just the amount of times that the penalty kill is asked to do their job. I think it just tends to lean over exposure. And also, I think the Wild tend to get kind of hemmed in. Winnipeg on their penalty kill tonight was very aggressive. They went out to the blue line to try to contest zone entries, which was a problem for most of the night for the Minnesota Wild. That is what the Jets do. They played it aggressively, and if you play it aggressively, you limit the amount of time in which players have to react or to make decisions or to move the puck around. If you limit that time, you force mistakes, and that leads to opportunities or just clearing attempts. The Wild, I would say, their penalty kill is good about 80 to 85% of the kill, but in order for it to be successful, you got to be good for 100%. And this is the same with the power play. Like, those units are judged based off of how many times you prevent goals from being scored or how many times you score in the case of the power play. And so it doesn't matter if you have a power play for 2 minutes, get a ton of good looks and don't score, you still didn't score. Same thing with the penalty kill. You can get a couple of really good clears and then things get a little disjointed and the other team goes into the zone and they score and it's an unsuccessful kill. So it's really double-edged sword, in my opinion, that you have to kind of look at what happens while also checking that box of, did the other team score? Did they not? So it's always going to come down to those two things for those units. Zach joining us here tonight. Sucks not to win, but at least they got a point and no injuries on top of it. I'm not going to lie, I was worried in this one tonight that it just the last few times that the Wild have played Winnipeg, there seems like there's always been something that's happened. Didn't happen tonight. Both teams, for the most part, were focused on the hockey, and I don't know how much that has to do with the fact that Logan Stanley's on IR and Brandon Dillon is not on the roster. There are still some bigger players on that team, but it seemed like both teams were focused mostly on the hockey tonight, and I hope that is an indication that whatever beef was in the air last year has been squashed, and that now these two teams can kind of just focus on trying to get wins and not trying to knock players out of the lineup. Yeah, Ralphie boy, you're right on. That last power play was bad. But it's funny too, because even in the one before that, the power play before that, where the Wild didn't get a ton generated, they still did take Winnipeg out of rhythm a little bit. And so sometimes that's about all you can ask for, is just throwing another team out of whack. But I'll be interested to see if the power play still looks like that against the Blues. Then we might have some concerns, but I think for the most part, the Wild just had a tough time trying to really generate anything offensively. But at the end of the day, you got to get into the zone and move the puck around and give yourself an opportunity to score some goals. Didn't do that tonight, which is why the Jets came away with the win. Positive tonight, Gus's performance. Gus was fantastic. He was far and away the best player on the ice for the Minnesota Wild, and they needed him to be. Coming into this game, you knew you were going to be going up against it, and Filip Gustavsson kept the Wild in the game the entire night. They leaned on him heavily in the second period, and he didn't blink. He didn't budge. But I think the thing that is key for Filip Gustavsson is that he is just more, he seems more decisive. Like, he seems like he's reacting to things in a much quicker manner. He's seeing the puck really well, which leads to him being able to handle those instances in which, Wild couldn't really get anything generated. And so the Jets spent a lot of time in the offensive zone. And if not for Gus, could have been looking at a 4 or a 5-1 game pretty easily. But Gus, I think, did a really good job in this one. I'm just going to look to see what his numbers were, if they have it. So Gustafsson saved 0.5 goals above expected. So based off of how the entire game went, Winnipeg had an expected goals of 2.55. Gus gave up 2. So he was better than your standard run-of-the-mill goalie. On the other side, Connor Hellebuyck had an expected goals against of 2.10. He allowed 1. So he was 1.11 goals saved above expected. And he played really well. He had trouble fighting the puck or finding the puck a few times, but he was able to keep Winnipeg in it too, and to keep it from ever really getting out of hand. There were a couple of plays where it looked like an adventure, but he's a fantastic goalie. And so it just, you got to find a way with some of those chances in close. You got to find a way to bury one of those. Freddie Gaudreau had the breakaway. Ryan Hartman had an opportunity. Kirill and Rossi had an opportunity. If you bury one of those odd man rush chances, then you put yourself in good position to be able to come away with a win. And Hellebuyck in all of those instances were he was just nails in all those chances, and that's why the Wild only got 1 goal here tonight. Eck and Spurgeon are injured, scrambling to get good line matchups, inconsistent goaltending. This isn't 2-1. This is 1-0-2. I got to stick with my guns on 6th or worse this season. That is entirely your prerogative. And like I said, Wampa, you nailed it last year, and so I would be inclined to agree. Nothing really changed about this team, and honestly, we're probably going to get to the end of the season, and you're going to be right on again. Haven't been wrong for, 2 years, 3 years? So let's jot this one down and see where it gets. But you continue to get games into OT but not close them. That's a good recipe for a 6th or worst finish. So we'll see what happens. Brian is right on here. Neutral zone entries need work. Keep seeing no-look passes to the other teams. Good effort. Yeah, the zone entries were not great, really, at all. Winnipeg, it seemed like, was able to get to just about every puck that was out there. That's part of the strategy for Winnipeg, too, is they like to clog those passing lanes, and they did a really good job of preventing the Wild from, for the most part, getting anything consistently going in the offensive zone. So that's a tough team. That's a good Winnipeg team. Probably shouldn't have counted them out as much as we did this year so far. They're a tough and a really good defensive team that just gave the Wild some fits here tonight. Obvious through 3 games, the Wild are one of the slowest teams in the NHL. I don't. It's not wrong, and we knew that. We knew that coming in. That this is a team that still leans more size than they do speed and skill. Players in the system that are coming up that will hopefully help with that, but at this point, you're still having players out there that just really are not the fleetest of foot. It's more noticeable some games than it is in this one, because Winnipeg is a big team too, but that's where you hope the team is going, is more speed and skill as opposed to big size. But there are still teams that deploy that, and so you need to have a little bit yourself, or you have what happened at the end of the season last year where the Wild just got ragdolled by everybody after they traded Duhaime, they traded Dewar, they traded Pat Maroon. After that point, with Foligno on the shelf, they got ragdolled pretty frequently. So you need to have a little bit of it, but you need to have the right mix of speed and skill in the top of the lineup too. And the Wild are getting closer, but there still are a few players away from really utilizing that tonight. Amanda joining us. Liam had a hard night tonight. This was a tough team to break into the lineup against. I do like that Ogren was battling along the boards. That's about all you can expect from a player in Ogren. And I talked about it in the little pregame bit that we did, that if Johansson's not able to play, I would like Ogren to get an opportunity in that spot. Reality of the situation is that Marcus Johansson's not being pulled out of that spot unless his performance substantially dips. Now, that second line was quieter tonight. Still had guys battling along the boards for the puck, but now it's on the second line to try to get back on track against the St. Louis Blues on Tuesday. It's an ebb and flow all season. You're not going to have lines are not going to be like high full throttle every game. You just hope that more often than not they are. And tonight, quiet night for the second, but we'll see if they get back on track. I think the main thing to keep in mind is that the Kaprizov line had a pretty strong night despite being like beyond empty in the tank. Top line still had a strong night here tonight. Boldy, a lot of guys had no gas, but at the end of the day, you still have to kind of power through and find a way to get it done there at the end of the game. What about that face-off draw on Clapper for a goal with 1 second left? When is the last game anyone's ever seen that happen successfully? Dallas did that against the Wild in the postseason a couple of seasons ago. Those drawn-up plays where you get a shot quickly off the face-off. All you have to do to make sure that doesn't happen is get a stick on the puck. Knock it to one of the sides, get it left or right. Matt Boldy was in the face-off circle for that one, didn't get it, and so he did not do his job in that moment. And if he does his job there, then I have a hard time believing that Winnipeg is able to get a shot or a goal in that situation. But it's also kind of just cruelly funny as well that it seems like that kind of thing just happens more regularly against Minnesota teams than it does anybody else. I kind of shook my head and chuckled when that puck went in. But again, you win a face-off, you push the puck off to the left, you do your job, and end of story. That's a situation in which Joel Eriksson Ek would be really handy to have, because even if he doesn't win the face-off, I feel like Ek would be able to do a good job of at least delaying that process. And you don't have time to delay in that situation. You got 1 second to get that shot off. And so I feel like Ek could have delayed that enough to where Winnipeg doesn't get a good look there. And you go into the first intermission leading 1-0 as opposed to tied 1-1. So, it's a game. It's a game of seconds. It's a game of inches. That's just how she goes some nights. Faber with almost 30 minutes again. The Wild are leaning on him again this year, but this is largely because Jared Spurgeon not in the lineup. Now, the latest that I heard on Spurgeon was that he is being evaluated with a lower body injury. I didn't see anything over the last couple of games that that speaks to, I didn't see anything where it's like, oh, he definitely got injured there. So I have no idea what's going on. I just know we were coming into the season, and Spurgeon had 2 major surgeries in the offseason. So beyond that, can't really speak to what it is. I'm sure we'll get some sort of update before Tuesday, but I would imagine it's probably going to be. I'll just put it at a week or two, and we'll see where we get from there. But yeah, all told, Faber, a couple shots on net, 25-57 on the ice, 2 minutes 37 seconds on the power play, and 1:36 on the penalty kill. Peter, man, we don't need to do this already. We don't need to do this at this point in the season. We're going to have plenty of time to do this in the offseason and all of next year, and up until the point that Kirill says, thanks, no thanks. We're going to have plenty of time for that. We don't need to start it in Game 3 of the season before the Wild can even negotiate with him. But thank you for joining the show. Daniel joining us again. Love the goal from Midzi. Gus was on fire tonight. Love the risk some forwards would take to interrupt passes. A lot of good stuff to build upon. It's a tough Winnipeg team. I keep saying that, and just what more can you do? You win some on the road, you lose some. If you play like that, I feel like you're gonna be closer than not. And the Wild kept it close even with absolute dead legs. So, we'll see what happens. Denny's here. Gus Bus is back. And Ron had a comment earlier. I kind of glossed over it, but I wanted to get back to it. There still is Filip Gustavsson trade discussion. Still. Because, you got to get Jesper in here. And I'm going to do probably a full episode on the 3 goalie rotation, because now Jesper has been sent down twice in the first 3 games of the season. And with Samuel Levi in net for the Iowa Wild, and there's another goalie down there as well, there's no room at the inn. I feel like there was one spot. Or you simply say, hey, Flower, it's time. And then you just start mixing Jesper in and see what he's got. But it feels like this is going to be his whole season until something happens with Fleury, is that Jesper is just going to be up and down and up and down and up and down, and is going to get mixed in sparingly. He's going to get mixed in sparingly in Iowa. I hope that's not the case, but where do you see him mixing in? Maybe we see him Tuesday. I guess we'll find out. Bold prediction from Dougie. Avs are the disappointment of the league this season. Dumpster fire in the net. Yeah, Georgiev is not great. Like, I don't know. I don't know what to think. That team, they've got obviously the top level guys, but there's some warts on that roster, to say the least. Damon Hunt instead of Zach Bogosian. Yeah, I mean, at this point, like, what is the plan for him too? We're 3 games in, so we're not going to get any of these requested changes for a while yet, but I think you just got to trust that signs continue to point in those directions to where then you see some of these things, as opposed to just continuing to see the same thing over and over. Todd, what a mess. Game was just a mess. It'd be 10-1 if it weren't for Gus. If Fleury was in net, it would have been like 20. 20-1. Bogosian can go apply as an extra in the next Mad Max movie. Well, unfortunately, those movies were so terrible to the point that I don't think there will be another one. But there are plenty of other movies that he can go for. But I'd probably rather Merrill at this point between the two. Chisholm got back in at least, which is good. And then, he was helping out on the power play. He had at least some fresh legs tonight, which was nice. But, now you wonder how long Spurgeon's going to be out, how long we're going to be dealing with that. Did the numbers, and if everyone is 8 to 12% and shoot 2 times each night, they will have 20 plus goals. It's not hard. Like, the math is not it's not that difficult to get to those types of statistics. Boldy's got 2 goals in 3 games, so he's obviously tracking there. Matt Zuccarello through the first 3 games of the season has I think, he's been fine with Kirill. Kaprizov starting to get going. Whole offense was quiet tonight, but this is why it's precarious to do any sort of real, like, I know what this team is until you get about a quarter of the way in, because it changes so much from night to night, and you go in and you're like, boy, this offense looks fantastic against the Kraken, and the opportunities tighten up against the Jets. And so it's about 20 games in, we'll be able to get a real feel for how this team looks. But I would just say that if you expect much more than a better start compared to how last year went, that might be the only thing that we get. And you're 1-0-2 right now. So you're not even necessarily that far off from where you were last year. But I guess at least the games have been closer, because already at this point last year, the Wild got their teeth kicked in a couple of times. What was how did the schedule go at the beginning of the season last year? Yeah, so the Wild, they beat Florida, then they lost to Toronto 7-4, and that game was they were leading at one point and just absolutely got just destroyed after that. Then they beat Montreal 5-2, and that was a real get back on track game, and then lost to Los Angeles, lost to Columbus in overtime, beat Edmonton, and then lost 4 straight. So you are, as of right now, through 3 games, 1-0-2. Wild were 2-1 last year. The games have been closer, though. I think that's the thing to key in on. They're still losses, but they at least have been more competitive to this point. So yeah, we'll see. But to circle it back to what was my original point like 4 minutes ago, we don't need to trade Gustavsson, I don't think. I think that's just wishful thinking that, we need to get Fleury and Jesper playing time the rest of the season. You're not going to get through the season with those 2 guys. I'll just tell you that right now. Because, as much as Liam Ogren had a solid night tonight, there were still plenty of instances in which he played on the timid side. Young players, there is an adjustment period for them to get ready at the NHL level. I would much rather that happen with Filip Gustavsson in the net protecting Jesper than Marc-Andre Fleury. That is a position that I'm just not going to budge from. And so for those that are saying trade Gus for whatever you can get for him, I'm not on board with that. I think having Filip Gustavsson on this roster next year to guide Jesper through a full season, to where if Jesper has points during the year where he maybe needs some time to take in what's going on, you have a guy in Gus who can do that. Whereas, if you trade Gus, Fleury retires at the end of this season, then Jesper is on an island by himself next year. You sign a free agent goalie to help, but you are basically throwing him to the wolves full time. Is there a chance that he is ready for that? Sure. But is there a chance that it's going to be overwhelming? Yes. So I'd rather have Gus here to be able to help with that. And if it ends up that Gus continues his solid performance, you sign him and you keep him around and you go with two. How many teams in the league have gone with the two goalie approach? Plenty, because you can't get through a season with just one guy. You can't. And I guess I would rather have a known quantity than going into the season next year with just a total level of unknown. That's just me. But apparently there still are plenty of people that are saying, let him stack up a few good starts together and trade him for whatever you can get. And it just, that just is, I will never get on board with that logic. Should Fleury have re-upped? That is the discussion that we should be having. Not what are we going to trade Gus for? Dougie's still worried about Spurgeon, not just because of the difficulties he causes by being frequently injured, but his personal long-term health as a result of the injuries. Yeah, I don't know what this latest one is, but it is something that I think you really have to start taking a serious look at, because I'll never fault Spurgeon for trying to come back and trying to work his way back from it. But at some point, is having a player on the roster that is making $7.5 million a year worth them playing between 20 to 40 games a season? At some point, you have to make some tough business decisions. And I don't know. I don't know where we're at. So this is the other thing too. I'll reiterate for Will is I didn't see anything specific that that would warrant a new injury, or I didn't see anything that I could point to that's, oh yeah, that's definitely where it happened. I didn't see anything stand out. So I don't know if this is just an aggravation of something or what the deal is, but knowing the NHL will get a vague designation, and that'll be it. Where was Johansson? It's a good question, Denny. I don't know. I don't know on this one. It was a tough night for that second line, and he could be dealing with that knee injury that he suffered against the Kraken. But I did see some battles along the boards, but ultimately that second line needs to do a little more, I think. And they didn't tonight. Kirill set up Rossi twice with grade A chances. Got to bury those as a 1C. Yeah, this is so whether it's the Rossi chances, whether it's the Ryan Hartman chance in close, whether it be the Freddie Gaudreau one, those are the ones that you need to score on. And you score on one or two of those, you win this game. you don't, and you come up on the losing end. So it comes down to a couple of plays here or there. Especially in a game that is as close as this is. Height needs another year in juniors and at least part of a year in Iowa. This is going to be, I think this is what we will see with Riley Height is just another full year, and then they'll give him an opportunity in training camp to see if he is capable of winning a job out of camp. If not, then he'll probably head down to Iowa, but we'll see. I hate last night's point, Britt. I don't have any problem with tonight's. I don't have any problem with tonight's point. They battled really well, and just came down to chances that they weren't able to battle or weren't able to bury. So I don't have a point. I don't have a problem with tonight's game. Last night it just feels like they kind of gave one away. So that's all it is. It's just you were on the wrong end of a couple of chances, but just couldn't quite get them buried. Can we expect any production from Trenin? This is a good question because Trenin is not too much of a goal scorer. So his production more lies in the areas of physicality and trying to limit opportunities for the opponent. Will he mix in goals here and there? Sure. But I wouldn't count on it regularly. He's like a 8 to 10 goal type a year type guy. That's the high end, I think, for his level of production. Just want to remind everybody to join the live show tomorrow night. Denny, I'm sure, has a long list of thoughts for what we've seen through the first few games of the season, some needed changes, and the level at which the panic button should be hit. We'll have that for you 8 p.m. Tomorrow night, right here on the old YouTube. Wild have become old and slow, starting to expect some of them to show up with walkers. This is a young man's game. Well, tell that to the GM. He's the one that put the roster together. Suppose if Spurge goes on long-term injured reserve, that does open up some money. Yeah, that's the good kind of flip side of this is that you would be able to get some money freed up. What would you do with that, though, is the key. Like, if you free up Spurgeon's money, what do you do? Who do you put in there? Are you going to go trade for David Perron from the Detroit Red Wings? I still you want to talk about maybe the thing that aggravated me most about the actually, how is David Perron doing so far? Where did he even go in the off season? I don't even didn't he go to the Senators? Because that was the rumored fit for the top 6 pretty much all season, all off season. David Perron, 2 games in, zeros. Absolute zeros for a Senators team that is 1-1 in the Atlantic Division so far. Dougie's right on here. Trenin is Moose 2.0. And this is where all of the questioning came from in the signing. I didn't think Trenin in a vacuum would. I didn't think that was a bad signing in and of itself. Maybe a year too long, a little bit too much money, but where the Wild are at in their process, that's what you have to do to get people to come here. So I didn't have, but it's the fact that you have a guy that is basically his role to play is where the issue came, is that you already had Marcus Foligno on the roster. Do you really need another one of those? If the Wild would have added Jakub Lauko and a scorer, I probably would have been like, all right, game on, let's ball. But you work on your identity, and Trenin to this point, what did he do tonight? Because I thought his game against the Kraken, I thought he played pretty well in that one. Trenin had a block. He did have a penalty. He had 2 hits and a takeaway in 11 minutes, 43 seconds on ice. Marcus Foligno, by extension, he had 1 hit, 1 takeaway in 12 minutes, 36 seconds. That feels light. I feel like Foligno had more hits than just the 1. So maybe he only got credited with 1, but it felt like he had more than just the 1 hit. I would have had him at around 3 or 4. So I don't know. Official scorekeepers. What was the deal with the no call and the too many men? This is a good question as well. I kind of covered it, but it feels like the officials were convinced that the 6th Jets player was moving off the ice at the time that the puck was being played. And so that's why they picked up the penalty. But I feel like there's got to be a way to say, okay, the puck is being played. How many people are on the ice at that moment? And where are they at? Now, evidently, NHL coaches can do challenges this year now. So would that have been an opportunity for John Hynes to challenge it? But then again, if you get it wrong, is that a delay of game penalty? And I feel like at that point, Hynes probably didn't think that it was worth really diving into to try to, maybe benefit from. So they just, I think, opted to not really do anything with that. Would Yurov be an upgrade at 1C? I think the hope is that Yurov projects having first line level upside. Now, he may not be a tried and true center, but I think the hope is that he will be able to take over for Matt Zuccarello, good Lord, Matt Zuccarello, and take that spot on the top line next year, or at the very least, take Marcus Johansson's spot in the top 6 to kind of get himself going. But Yurov, projects to be a top of the lineup player. So the hope is that he'll be able to contribute in that type of role when he gets here next year, if he comes here next year. Moose is already starting to get frustrated. We know what happens when he's frustrated. Same thing as when Hartman gets frustrated. Moose was irate at points throughout this game, and he didn't do anything in particular to go over the line, but it's like a dog with one of those invisible fences. They're not probably going to cross it unless you do something to overtly provoke them. But, we've seen it from this team in the past, is that they tend to kind of boil over at points. And if they can toe that line, great. But if not, then you get put on the penalty kill again, and we all know what happens there. 3 games without Hartman in the box. Yeah, I think, the goal that Hartman had against Seattle was huge. Stepping up and being able to score that goal. Just needed that second line to be able to do something in this one. That was pretty much the outcome, the difference here in this game tonight. Yurov with 2 goals, 4 assists in 10 KHL games, missed time early after recovering from injury. Yeah, I think that was something that I tried to point out at the time when the KHL season started, is that it was not a new injury for Yurov. It was recovery from off-season injuries. And now he's back and he's going, and 6 points in 10 games, not too bad. Do you think Jesper gets the next start? I don't. I don't know what the plan is for him. Now, if it comes out that he's going to get the start, wonderful, great, fantastic. But it's not going to surprise me in the slightest if Flower gets the next, because you've got St. Louis on Tuesday, and then after that you play Columbus on the road. Columbus, theoretically, an easier matchup, so maybe he gets in there. But I don't know what the plan. I don't know what the plan is for this situation, and part of me kind of feels like the Wild don't know either. But there just really isn't a spot for Jesper in Iowa, because you want to see what Samuel Levi has. You want to see what he has in an extended amount of starts. And so that net down in Iowa is pretty crowded. And you're not going to do anything with Fleury this season. I will shave my head bald if the Wild do anything with Marc-Andre Fleury this season. If they release him, if they trade him, that is it's not 0, but it's close percentage chance of happening. That if something does, I'll get the razor out and I'll go full cue ball if Marc-Andre Fleury is not on the roster by the end of the season. But it feels like whatever happens there, it's going to be Fleury's choice as opposed to the Wild. No, not the beard. The beard stays. We're never getting rid of the beard, because my face looks like Mike McCarthy, Dallas Cowboys head coach, without facial hair. And so the beard is never going to leave, but I will go the Jeff Bridges in the first Iron Man movie route. If Fleury is not on the roster by the end of the season. Because I don't see a scenario in which Bill Guerin is going to do that to one of his buddies. So Jesper, I guess, is just kind of, he's too good for Iowa, but you have 2 goalies at the NHL level. And so we're going to just do this for the entirety of the season, it seems like. Which is just, I don't want to have to do this, but I guess we'll see. So, all in all tonight, now we could maybe make this a thing. I just would do, if the Wild did win the Cup and I did go that route, I just would not be on camera until it grew back, because it's jarring. Like, it's physically jarring to me to see some of the old episode clips. I can't do it. I also can't do this because I am still in the process of trying to secure full-time employment. And I feel like that's going to look really weird going into a job interview with one eyebrow. So I like the thought, but I need to be presentable for prospective employers. So these are good ideas, though. But we'll see. let's leave you with one thing as we finish up, because I think we've thoroughly broken down what has happened in this game. Honestly, like, there's not. It comes down to not capitalizing on opportunities. That's really as simple as it was. I applaud the battle level, but at the end of the day, you gotta find a way to make those chances count. Looks like there is not post-game audio at this point. So what we'll do, we'll have the three things for you tomorrow as we typically do. But let's leave you with one thing. Joel Eriksson Ek will be back on Tuesday. And so we will, I think, see the same combinations we've seen with Kirill, Rossi, Zook, and Johansson, Boldy, and Ek. But it's going to be on those two lines because guess what? St. Louis Blues have a pretty good top six themselves. And so those lines are going to be pushing. And on the road, you're going to be put up against defensive matchups that maybe try to make things tough for you. Those two lines have to be the drivers. And so Boldy line was the driver in game one. The Kirill line was the driver in game two. Offense really didn't do a ton in game three, but I would still say the Kirill line did some driving. Who's going to be driving for game four? That's the question. And so 1-0-2 after 3 games. I feel like the battle level was in the right direction. This one heading into St. Louis, but it'd be nice to close out a win on the road, especially early on, because 1-0-3 heading into Columbus, that feels like the same story as last year, just written in different font. So we'll see what the Wild have in store for us in Tuesday's matchup against the Jets. We'll have you covered for that one as well. So make sure to join us once again on Tuesday for more live coverage of the Minnesota Wild. We got 2 episodes coming out for you tomorrow, plus the 8 p.m. edition of What the Hell Are You Smoking? So make sure to check in on all of those as we get you set for another big week of Minnesota Wild hockey. Thanks to everybody who tuned in here tonight, and we'll catch you for a full week of coverage. Make sure to hit that like button before you head out for the evening, and we will see you tomorrow with a new episode of Locked On Wilds. We've got you covered with new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.